Hello team and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MSP. This is Ukraine War News Update, second part thereof for the 22nd of November 2023. Let's get straight to where we normally start for this video, the military aid segment. Glad to have you on board. Thank you for watching and supporting the channel. Right, today is the start of another Ramstein meeting where international allies of Ukraine get together in a big meeting and say, right, what do we need to get Ukraine? What weapons do they need? What can we do together? And it's really useful. And we often see an awful lot of announcements on the back of this, either the day before, the day of, or after Ramstein. So we'll dip into some of those. It's the 17th meeting of the Ukraine Defense Contact Group. Most heads of defense will join the meeting online, so not everyone's going to be anywhere in any particular place in person. I presume it's taking place in Ramstein in Germany. They have had those meetings, not just in Ramstein, as far as I understand. Right. The EU is preparing to plan to provide Ukraine with long-term security commitments. It includes a mechanism of long-term military support, training of the armed forces, and support for the development of the state's defense industry, which is really good news there. In fact, it's probably worth just bringing this one in next. It makes a bit more sense. So general staff have said that over 100,000 Ukrainian soldiers have trained in partner countries, and largely in the EU and the UK as well. Over 100,000 Ukrainian soldiers have received training in facilities of more than 30 partner countries in less than 2 years. So even when they're getting trained, say in the UK, not just the UK that's involved in that training. We provide the facilities, but you'll have Kiwi, Aussie, Canadian, like Swedish, Norwegian trainers helping out to deliver the training. It's a real combined effort, a cooperative effort. So that's fantastic. So the EU there, setting up things on that long-term basis is really important as a message to Putin to say we're not just helping this year and then they have to wait to see if we can afford the funding for next year, that we're putting structures in place. Norway have done this. Canada are doing this, as we'll come on to see. The really clear messaging to say, no, we are supporting Ukraine and this is contractually, set out, or we set out the timetable for this on an ongoing long-term basis. Really important. Now, sticking with the EU Commissioner advocates for redirecting 40% of EU ammo exports to fulfill Ukraine's million-round needs. Okay, what's this? Well, the EU said we're going to provide 1 million rounds to Ukraine within a year, and then halfway through the year, they're only 30% along there, 300,000 rounds. Now, I was talking about if you're ramping up production, you will see each month give more and more to Ukraine. So 300,000 halfway through the year could still support 1 million by the end of the year as that production gets ramped up and you see the curve go like that. However, it will be a challenge for 1 million to get there. I was just saying that don't think it can't be done given that 300,000 is only there halfway through the year. Nevertheless, challenges are evident. During a question and answer session with members of the European Parliament in Brussels on November the 21st, a European Commissioner for the Internal Market, Thierry Breton, shared insights on the EU's pledge to supply Ukraine with 1 million rounds of ammunition by March 2024. Breton attributed his assessment to his visits to military industrial firms across 15 EU member states. He stated that by spring 2024, EU defense companies are expected to achieve a production capacity of 1 million artillery shells annually. Furthermore, he projected that by the end of the following year, the production rate could increase to between 1.3 and 1.4 million shells per year, according to DW. That's the German national media organization. So at the same time, according to Breton, quote, the problem lies in a situation with contracts in general, as about 40% of the production is delivered outside Europe to third countries. In other words, they're on target for producing 1 million rounds a year. That's not a problem. The problem is that they're contractually obliged to give 40% of that as it stands to third-party entities outside of the EU. So they are, these companies are not state-run entities necessarily. There'll be private companies that are creating or fulfilling orders to other countries for ammunition, and Ukraine, the EU saying, right, we're going to give 1 million rounds to Ukraine, has to take into account that actually much of the production would previously have been for those third-party entities. So, Thierry Breton has suggested that for the entire quantity of produced ammunition to be delivered to Ukraine, EU member states must prioritise Ukrainian needs in their production schedules. However, he noted that the EU Council has not endorsed this proposal. Additionally, he mentioned that EU countries are currently not signing a sufficient number of contracts for shell production. But not only do they need to get more contracts with more producers within the EU to ramp up that production, but they also need to prioritize Ukraine over those other countries. Of course, there may be legal teams that might have something to say about that on behalf of those other countries. Right, the Pentagon has denied the information that AB News reported that the supply shells to Ukraine from NATO has fallen by 30%. This is what I reported yesterday. There were claims that because of the Israel conflict, the many of the NATO shells due to go to Ukraine were going to be directed towards Israel. There's some claims that it wasn't so much a redirection, but actually where they were originally due to go. But because Ukraine came along, they got redirected towards Ukraine, and now the Israel conflict has caused them to be redirected back to Israel. Anyway, whatever the situation is there, is it Sabrina Singh, who's the Pentagon spokeswoman, said, yeah, I saw that story. Look, I would push back on that assertion. We have been able to supply Ukraine with what it needs during its counteroffensive, and we will continue to supply Ukraine with what it needs as we head into winter. We're able to do that, and we're able to support Israel in what it needs to defend itself in its war with Hamas. We feel confident we can do both, and we're going to continue to do both. But let me just take this moment to reiterate that we need Congress's help. So the Pentagon getting frustrated with the impasse in Congress, where it's looking like the funding will get through before Christmas, but it's not ideal. It's not cool. We cannot do this without congressional or Congress passing the supplemental bill, which we submitted months ago, and that is a need for urgent emergency assistance, and that's not just for Ukraine, it's also for Israel and also for the Indo-Pacific. And so the only way we can continue to support Ukraine is if Congress passes that urgent supplemental that we requested. Sort it out, Mike Johnson. Right, Germany just again coming up with the goods. I keep giving Germany props, although Taurus guys, come on, Taurus. German Defense Minister Pistorius announced, Boris Pistorius, not Oscar Pistorius, two very different people, announced a new 1.3 billion euro aid package to Ukraine at a joint briefing with the Ukrainian Minister of Defense, Rustem Umerov. So this includes 4 Iris-T air defense systems, most likely full batteries. Those are really good. I presume they'll be the medium range systems. There might be a mix of them, medium or short range. Very able defense systems. 20,000 155mm shells, obviously very useful. Anti-tank mines, surveillance drones and detection systems, and other weapons. It might be worth bringing in this next nugget, actually. So the Swiss and just awesome, 1.3 billion euros of aid from Germany is absolutely brilliant. Thank you to them. The Swiss government has approved the transfer of Leopard 2 tanks to Germany with the condition that they not be given to Ukraine, according to the Swiss Federal Council. So I was looking into this. This is really good news, and I hope that it allows for backfilling. So Switzerland sells back 25 MBT main battle tanks to Germany. The Swiss government has approved the export of 25 main battle tanks to Rheinmetall Landsystem GmbH. It said on Wednesday, quote, Germany has given assurances that the tanks will remain either in Germany with NATO or with its EU partners, the statement said. They will be used to supplement their armaments. The tanks cannot be sent to Ukraine, not even indirectly. Now, I presume that means maybe in parts or something like that. As I'm hoping this will allow 25, I'm sure they wouldn't be able to. It's really difficult. Imagine you give 25 quid to someone and they now have 250 quid. So I've given you 25 quid. They can still use that 25 quid from their 225 quid they would have had to give to someone else and say, well, I haven't given your £25. I'm sure you can't stop assistance from that country, from Germany, going to Ukraine on the back of this. I think that'd be too difficult. I'm pretty sure Germany would still be able to give 25 tanks of their own to Ukraine and say, look, these weren't the tanks you gave. This isn't indirectly giving those tanks to Ukraine, even though it kind of is. It's you've given us 25 and we've given 25 of our own to Ukraine. I'm sure they'll still be able to do that. In September, Parliament agreed to decommission this equipment on condition that it be sold back to the company that manufactured it, so Rheinmetall. Following this decision, Arma Suisse submitted an export application to the State Secretariat for Economic Affairs. A resale of these tanks will not prevent the Swiss Army from meeting its needs. The Army currently has 134 Leopard 2s in service and 96 in depot. The 25 tanks concerned will be taken from the latter, from depot. And it's nothing to do with the 100 Leopard 1s they have stored in Italy, the RUAG machines that they're not at the moment allowing to be exported. Rheinmetall wanted to buy those 96 tanks and then send them to Ukraine. Contract was signed subject to approval by the government, but the government refused its sale. So, such a shame. That would be superb if they could get all of 100 tanks moving. Right, talking about Swiss, a Swiss Army knife for the skies. Ukrainian pilot races to get to grips with the F-16 jet. It's a useful little CNN article here. So Moonfish is a call sign of the Ukrainian pilot who is training to fly in the US. Is training to fly the US-designed multi-role aircraft. He spoke with CNN via Zoom from an undisclosed location. So, okay, before we go back to there's this news that Denmark is now providing F-16 training for Ukrainian pilots. So we have 3 areas where I think F-16s are being... no, that's not have an F-16 other bit of news somewhere. No, it's gone. Bear with me 2 ticks. Yeah, here it is. Sorry, I deleted one of mine accidentally. So Ukraine Air Force spokesperson says some Ukrainian pilots are already flying with instructors on F-16s in Denmark, a precursor to solo flights and combat readiness, to which you can add... in Denmark, some Ukrainian pilots are already undergoing training. That's in addition to pilots training in USA and Great Britain. Not only pilots, but also other specialists, ground personnel, combat control, and aviation engineering service officers undergo training, he added. And there is also the training in Romania. So as far as I understand it, that's 4 places of training. So that's the UK, which I think will be on simulators, because we don't operate F-16s, the US, Denmark, and Romania. Now, let's go back to your man here. Who knows where he is? But anyway, Moonfish tells us he's in his 2nd month of training. He says the F-16 is a Swiss Army knife. He asked to be identified by his call sign for reasons of operational security. It's a very good weapon that can carry out any mission. The F-16 can provide cover for troops, ground attack targets, attack ground targets, and take on enemy planes and intercept missiles. This goes against what Kate McKenna, I almost mentioned this at the time, but I didn't want to get into the details of like contesting things. But if you remember, Kate McKenna was on talking about trying to get MQ-9 Reaper drones sorted. Also talked about how those drones can take on the role of F-16s and not put, therefore, pilots in harm's way. But she talked about F-16s only having one kind of role, which is a sniper in the air for other airplanes. Well, actually, it's a multi-role fighter. So it's fighter bomber. It's a multi-role aircraft. It can do more than just that. So that was an incorrect claim. Anyway. The F-16 can do all of those things, take on enemy planes, intercept missiles. But Ukraine's ongoing war with Russia means that training has to be compressed, Moonfish said. Quote, we would have had a lot of time to study the jet completely in peacetime, but we do not have the time, he said, adding there's enough to master the basic capabilities that Ukraine needs. Ukraine also needs a new fighters to help tackle another set of threats, Russian missiles and drones. Last winter, Moscow waged an extensive campaign to cripple Ukraine's energy infrastructure, targeting generating facilities and forcing electricity shutdowns. As winter closes in, concerns remain high that Russian missiles and drones will wreak havoc again. Ukrainian Air Force Commander Oleshchuk told CNN that Ukrainian air defenses destroy on average about 75% of incoming cruise missiles and attack drones, but the remainder of the weapons still reach their targets. Quote, we desperately need additional air defense systems, short, medium, and long range, as well as modern aircraft to protect the country and achieve air superiority over the occupied territories. Oleszchuk said. So this is great that Germany are getting another 4 Iris-T systems that will help. Just over time, Ukraine are getting more and more, a greater and greater air defense network. If you think where they are now compared to where they were a year ago, it's going to be a very different winter. It will be really challenging because it appears that the Russians are stockpiling huge numbers of cruise missiles. So we're probably going to see waves of cruise missiles that we've never seen before. But Ukraine also have far greater air defense systems in place and coverage. Ukraine's inventory of Soviet-era jets is aging, with some of the Air Force's aircraft in service about twice as old as their pilots. Quote, we will keep these jets in good condition, but we need to understand that missions flown by our pilots on Soviet equipment are deadly, Oleszchuk said, and we are losing the best of them. So they are losing airframes, they are losing their pilots. Troops on the ground are also waiting for the F-16. The deputy commander of the 3rd Separate Assault Brigade, who goes by the call sign Mose, told CNN that having F-16s in the air would make it easier for the infantry to carry out their missions with better cover. Quote, for the infantry, these aircraft are extremely important, first and foremost in offensive operations and advances, he said. The jets will allow us to gain dominance in the air and support the infantry that move forward. An F-16 can hit enemy ground targets and destroy or disrupt enemy logistics. So he's now getting in the cockpit, seeing what it's like. He's like, it's quite cramped, he said. Ergonomics aside, the Ukrainian pilot said the aircraft was more sophisticated in terms of avionics and very simple in terms of control and interface. The F-16 is maneuverable, he says. It encourages you to pilot in an aggressive style. Moonfish said that if the F-16s were in Ukraine right now, one of the main tasks would be repelling waves of Russian drone and missile attacks. Quote, the software on the F-16 is constantly being improved. At the same time, the software systems on Soviet-designed MiG-29 and Su-27s are still from the late 1980s, when these planes were being developed. That period, drones existed only in science fiction books. I mean that. At the time, no one considered drones to be a serious threat that could be destroyed by fighter aircraft. In other words, those Soviet-era planes just aren't fit for purpose. Some of the main selection criteria for training on long-awaited jets were English language proficiency, experience, and age. Because of the ongoing war, the program is intensive. So, good stuff there, and let's hope to see F-16s getting into Ukrainian airspace soon. Right, talking about long-term aid over many years, Canada has said that they are providing Ukraine with more than 869 million, so almost $1 billion. It's about $1 billion, I believe. 869 million euros in military aid from 2023 to 2026. The information appeared in the economic report of the country's government. So fantastic stuff from Canada there. I'm sure that's Mark and Elena Bizcu in Canada giving their thoughts by ESP through to Justin Trudeau and the Ministry of Defense there, and getting that done. So thanks, guys. Challenger 2 seen on the front line, or at least near the front line in the Robotina area. This is good stuff. In fact, there's Leopard 2s being spotted around Avdiivka. We have seen that previously, but there's more footage coming out. So these main battle tanks are finding their way into footage now, which on the one hand you might say is a good thing. It's good to see these bits of kit that they've been designed for this being used. But on the other hand, it does probably mean that Ukraine has been attriting, or had some of their other tanks attrited to the point that where you're going to see these more and more. So, there's two sides to that coin. And sort of moving towards the end, we have Russian, I guess, cooperation with Iran being slightly worrying. The White House voices concerns about Russia on Iran arms supply. The White House voiced that concern, particularly concerning Iran providing Russia with ballistic missiles. These new, is it Fatah missiles, for use in its war with Ukraine. Development that would probably be disastrous for the Ukrainian people, the US National Security official said. So this has long been on the cards. We have been expecting this. National Security Council spokesperson John Kirby noted that Iran has already been providing Russia with unmanned aerial vehicles or drones, guided aerial bombs and artillery ammunition, and may be preparing to go a step further in its support for Russia. In fact, Iran released some footage, I think, in the last 24 hours of a new test of one of their new ballistic missiles. Kirby highlighted a September meeting in which Iran hosted the Russian Defense Minister Shoigu to show off a range of ballistic missile systems, sparking US concern. Quote, "We are therefore concerned that Iran is considering providing Russia with ballistic missiles now for use in Ukraine. In return for that support, Russia has been offering Tehran unprecedented defense cooperation, including on missiles, electronics, and air defense. And that includes space as well. And they've been helping them with satellite capabilities and whatnot, I do believe. So there you go. It's even more reason for the US to, as it goes on to say here, release that funding to support Ukraine. It goes on to say that Iran's announcement earlier this year that it finalized a deal to buy Su-35 fighter jets from Russia was a worry. Kirby said in total, Iran is seeking billions of dollars worth of military equipment from Russia to strengthen its military capabilities. Russia has also been helping Iran develop and maintain its satellite collection capabilities and other space-based programs. He said the burgeoning military partnership between Iran and Russia was harmful to Ukraine, Iran's neighbors, and the Middle East, and quite frankly, to the international community. Absolutely agree. Yeah, so it's a worry that relationship that seems to be getting closer and closer. Right, Slovakia's parliament has approved the government led by Robert Fico. So he's gone into coalition with the far right and another, and I don't know who, I can't remember who the other political party was. He's a kind of centre-left populist, although I think his policies are kind of all over the place. But it's certainly a populist leader, very much pro-Kremlin, anti-Ukraine, and as a result, Slovakia not giving Ukraine military aid. So yeah, that is a shame. Investigative stories from Ukraine report that Russian military helicopters are getting Czech components despite sanctions. This is a problem we see all the time with all sorts of stuff. Is Western components end up in Russian weaponry, either through Iran or directly into, in this case, Russian helicopters. And that obviously needs to stop. Going to geopolitical topics. On the territory of Slovakia, carriers are blocking the movement of Ukrainian trucks through the checkpoint Vznemeka. State Border Guard Service of Ukraine has said the blockade began at 1:30. In its terms are not reported. Currently, there are about 300 trucks in the direction of Ukraine. So Slovakia joining in the blockade of their checkpoints with trucks to stop Ukrainian truckers getting exports out, so on and so forth. These arguments that are ongoing, particularly in Poland, now spreading to Slovakia. However, then it's now been announced that Slovakian truckers have unblocked the border with Ukraine, and they did so at midnight last night, only having joined those protests yesterday. So real challenge, but good news that might have come to an early end. We'll see how that develops, because it's really important that Ukraine are able to export to make the money to support their own defense of their own country. It's a real issue what's going on there. So yeah, that has happened. You can see a few more details there. Right. So Andrzej Duda, who is the Polish president, not the prime minister. So new prime minister is probably going to be Donald Tusk in a minority coalition, having replaced or looking to replace the Law and Justice Party as the ruling party. So they got the most votes, but no one wanted to go into coalition with them, and they were a minority. They had less than 50% of of parliamentarians and whatnot. So Donald Tusk with a coalition should be able to form a government to replace the Law and Justice Party. It shouldn't make too much difference to the position of Poland with regard to Ukraine. It might improve some situations with the farmers. I don't know. I mean, they'll be looking to do that. Where it will be more important is in the relationship Poland has with the EU. So Donald Tusk is a former EU politician, really big in the EU. So he will be driving Poland back towards the EU and sort of unity within the EU, which is really good, and I think will have a knock-on effect to Ukraine, because that division that was taking place between Poland and the EU at base, it's only going to benefit really Russia, even though Poland was strong on Ukraine. Divisions within the EU really do benefit Russia. Anyway, yesterday, Duda came out and said some really strong words in support of Ukraine. He said Poland side by side will stand with the Ukraine in the fight against the aggressor. We will help you on your way to the EU and NATO because we want to see you in our European family as quickly as possible. And then Zelensky said, "Dear Andrei, thank you for your strong words on this important day. When we are together, Ukrainians and Poles, we are invincible for our freedom and yours." So Zelensky being strong on the rhetoric as well, their really close relationship hopefully will continue to flourish there, even though there are issues on the borders, and even some interesting historical issues that hopefully have been ironed over. Rebar, the pro-Russian source, says the EU plans to restrict the movement of diplomats from Russia. This proposal was put forward by Czechia as part of the preparation of the 12th package of sanctions against Russia. There are no plans to completely restrict the movement of diplomats. To move around the EU, Russian diplomatic representatives will need to obtain visas and residence permits. The Czechs also propose checking diplomats' biometric passports as they are more difficult to forge. This is probably as a result of Russian diplomats who are effectively just spies. When you go to embassies, it's basically really just the FSB operating and spying on the local capital city. And when diplomats get removed from certain countries, basically they attempt to recycle them and put them through into other countries. So this would help that not to take place and say, right, you've been kicked out of the country for being a spy. And we don't want to see you around other EU countries, so do one. But a lot of them do end up, I think, in places like Hungary, however, and in the Balkans. Duda to Ukraine, so that was out of place, that one. So yeah, that strong rhetoric from Duda. Now this is a shame. Ukrainian refugee families in the UK are 4 times more likely to end up homeless. The UK, although some people looked at the UK and said, "Oh, you've done a good job with refugees," I know this from first-hand experience, and my sister had a refugee with her, and I know other people. It was a bit of a nightmare trying to get visas sorted out. It was, the intention was there in the rhetoric, but the intention was not there in the money and the infrastructure put in place to process Ukrainian refugee families. And it's such a shame to see British Red Cross now saying that on their research, more funding is needed to support Ukrainians to prevent them ending up on the streets this winter, as they're 4 times more likely to end up homeless. I mean, goodness me, taking refugees in and then seeing them end up on the streets in Britain is not cool. So hopefully that situation can be improved. Right, Forbes. I told you that Forbes, as a media site, was due to be taken over by a Russian oligarch. Well, that sale has been cancelled, allegedly. The parent company of Forbes magazine is no longer going forward with the sale to billionaire Austin Russell, linked by the media to Russian oligarch Magomed Musayev. So anyway, that's possibly good news in terms of Russian information, misinformation, disinformation, etc., etc. The European Parliament is opening an office in Ukraine. So again, this is good news for tightening that relationship between Ukraine and the EU. The European Parliament has reportedly agreed to establish an office in Ukraine and to expand its support for Ukraine's Verkhovna Rada, their own parliament. Good news. And then Tim White reports that Pakistan has announced it has applied to join the Russia-China BRICS group of countries. So BRICS is Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. Now, for those of you who might not know, India and China, India and China don't get on super well. India and Pakistan get on much worse. So you have a disputed area of Kashmir between India and Pakistan. And essentially Pakistan was where many Muslims went after I don't want to get into the long weeds of this, do I? So let's do a bit of Wikipedia here. So, story of history of the Islamic Republic of Pakistan began on 14th of August 1947 when the country came into being in the form of the Dominion of Pakistan within the British Commonwealth as a result of Pakistan movement and a partition of India. So this is where you had a lot of Muslims in India moving out to Pakistan. So where should we go to next? Pakistan faced a civil war and Indian military intervention in 1971, resulting in the succession of East Pakistan as a new country of Bangladesh. So Bangladesh formed out of that. Country has also unresolved territorial disputes with India, resulting in 4 conflicts. They were closely tied to the US in the Cold War. In the Afghan-Soviet War, it supported the Sunni Mujahideens and played a vital role in the defeat of the Soviet forces and forced them to withdraw from Afghanistan. The country continues to face challenging problems, including terrorism, poverty, illiteracy, corruption, and political instability. Terrorism due to the war in Afghanistan damaged the country's economy and infrastructure to a great extent from 2001 to 9, but Pakistan is once again developing. So anyway, it has these historical ties, but a lot of historical animosity towards India, and joining BRICS is an interesting kind of scenario because it could well improve the relationship between India and Pakistan, but it also could drive a wedge within BRICS. So yeah, a slight worry, but also Pakistan is very important in what goes on with regards to terrorism in and around that neck of the woods. And so the US has a long history of being involved with Pakistan. And so joining, kind of rejecting the US hegemony to join BRICS is itself another interesting situation with regard to that dynamic, the relationship with the West. So yeah, we'll have to watch that one, see which way that goes and what the ramifications may be. Anyway, thanks for watching. Really appreciate your support. By the way, I'm due to release a video that's not really anything. No, it is nothing to do with the Ukraine war on this channel. It's basically a ramble, an economics and tax ramble in response to a couple of comments because people didn't like me saying that, do you know what? Putin having 11 super yachts is not cool for some reason. They didn't think tax cuts for the rich was cool, and we should have tax cuts for the rich because it promotes innovation and all this kind of stuff. And I was like answering that and looking at a few bits and pieces of kind of data and talking about kind of happiness and stuff rather than just economic ideas. Anyway, that ramble, and it really is a bit of a ramble, is going to be released next. So if you're interested in that, me just banging on about economics and tax, then hey, check it out. Anyway, in the meantime, take care. Speak soon.